Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going to completely flip how you think about meaning, identity, and even your own memory. You know, if you've ever felt like you're constantly searching for your life's purpose, like it's a set of lost car keys you just need to locate and lock away in some vault, well, the material we're unpacking today is an absolute game changer. We're looking at a deeply relational philosophy of meaning. We're talking about truth not as a static object you own, but as an active, daily process that you participate in.
So right off the bat, this demands a massive paradigm shift. What if the meaning of your life isn't something you find, but something you do? We have to move away from treating purpose as this rigid, fragile object that we possess. We're stepping out of a possession framework, where truth is brittle and shatters under pressure, and stepping into what we can call a performance framework. It basically proposes that meaning is a resonance you have to generate every single day.
All right, let's jump right into Section 1, the filing cabinet lie and memory as performance.
We all kind of tend to think of our minds as these perfectly preserved archives, right? Like literal filing cabinets. But neurobiology tells a completely different, honestly shocking story. Every single time you remember something, you literally destroy and rewrite that original memory trace with your current emotions. It's a hard science process called memory reconsolidation. You never actually access the original past. You're only pulling up the last version you saved. So, you don't have a memory, you do a memory. And hey, while that might sound a bit terrifying at first, it's actually the exact generative performance that allows us to heal and evolve.
To really make sense of this, let's look at the parable of the scribe from our sources. Picture a young monk who's just despairing because the original paper of a sacred text crumbled to dust centuries ago. He feels like they're just copying a copy of a copy, but the wise abbot tells him, the paper was never the book. The book is the act of copying it every single night by a scribe whose hand and understanding age and change over time. Preserving truth isn't about you perfectly hoarding some ancient relic. It's your faithful, daily act of reproducing it. Fidelity is a doing.
Moving right along to Section 2, the jazz why, holding purpose through loss.
Now, if memory has to be regenerated, so must our why, especially when we face really profound grief. Think of the parable of the two flames. You have two travelers carrying lamps for their sons. The first man ties his reason to a literal stone tablet. I walk for my son. Very rigid. But the second man relights his lamp each dawn, speaking his reason aloud in whatever words fit that specific morning. It's improvisational, like jazz. When the tragic word arrives that both sons have died, the first man's stone tablet shatters and his light just goes out. But the second man? He relights his lamp out of sheer habit and grief and simply says, I walk now to carry him. The flame survives because the relationship adapted.
So shifting to this jazz why is absolutely crucial for surviving loss. Memory doesn't persist, but fidelity does, when we actively replay it. When life amputates the original object of our love, the jazz why survives, because the relationship simply shifts from being ahead of us to within us. You don't keep the past perfectly preserved in a drawer somewhere. Instead, you wake up and you re-keep the vow.
This brings us to Section 3, the power of the cut, the architecture of withdrawal.
So how does this relational philosophy actually transform our day-to-day interactions? Well, it's through a concept called tzimtzum, or divine withdrawal. The sources use this amazing parable of the bowl. A master potter teaches a student that a bowl isn't defined by the clay itself, but by the room you pull the clay back from. Years later, that same student is a shelter volunteer. A man comes in, grieving a birthday spent totally alone, and just mumbles, "It's fine." The volunteer feels that intense, immediate urge we all get to fix it, to advise, to fill the awkward silence. But remembering the potter's wheel, she consciously pulls her hands back. She just says, "I see you. Today counted."
I mean, have you ever felt that desperate urge to fix someone's problem with unsolicited advice? This parable brilliantly illustrates that not fixing isn't a lack of care. It's actually the ultimate act of making your reality habitable for someone else to truly be seen. It's an architecture of withdrawal. A genuine human meeting doesn't live in the clever advice you give. It lives in the hollow space you refuse to fill.
Let's dive into Section 4, the gift of impermanence and the shore of meaning.
Okay, this brings us to one of the most beautiful inversions in this entire explainer, how we view mortality. We almost always view endings as the absolute enemy of meaning, right? But the sources challenge this with the parable of the 4 minutes. A man stands by a river at the golden hour and he's furious because the beautiful light is already fading and he can't keep it. The teacher gently reminds him that if he could literally own the river, he'd stop truly looking at it. The constraint is what creates the attention. The looking literally is the having.
So the big takeaway here is that impermanence isn't the enemy of meaning. The very fact that things end is the exact condition that makes our attention and our love actually matter. Think about it. If we lived forever, we could postpone absolutely everything. Mortality isn't what breaks the chain of love. It's the condition under which love is recognized as love, rather than just cold physics. The invitation is written right there in the leaving. And our final section, Section 5, the palimpsest self and the organizer's dilemma.
Let's ground this high-level philosophy into our everyday professional lives and community organizing. Sociologist Erving Goffman introduced this really fascinating concept of the staged self. Basically, in boardrooms, organizers have to perform a highly legible, safe, and coherent version of themselves to build trust and get funding. But this has to be balanced with what the text calls the palimpsest self. A palimpsest is like an ancient parchment that's been written over, where the messy, layered, disrupted depth of real human encounters still bleeds through the surface.
The tension here is that institutions absolutely love the safe, performed surface. They want the staged symbol. But think about true organizing for a second. It requires the messy depth of having witnessed real suffering. The danger happens when we mistakenly think the scaffolding of our professional role is the actual building. The true cost of being perfectly legible to a boardroom is losing your human permeability to the actual community you serve.
To survive this dilemma, you can't just completely stop performing the role. I mean, that's practically impossible in public life. But you can remain deeply suspicious of your own fluency. You can intentionally let your raw, illegible lived experiences, the memory of a trembling hand in a shelter or a quiet confession in a hallway, let those bleed through that polished institutional surface. You have to let the older inscription show through, because that is where real honesty and power live.
Ultimately, we often fall into the trap of thinking that seeking means we are empty and having means we are full, like they're two opposite faces of a coin. But as the text points out, a river throwing back light doesn't glint because it's empty, it glints because it's overflowing. Seeking isn't a lack of meaning, it's an overflow of fullness looking for a shore. Both the having and the seeking are just part of the exact same beautiful reality.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want you to take this provocative thought with you. Remember that your why is jazz, not a stone tablet. It's meant to be replayed, relit, and rekept every single day. So ask yourself right now, how can you actively perform your meaning today? In the room of your life today, what space are you choosing to leave empty so that a genuine meaning can live there? Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive. I'll catch you in the next explainer.